All right, everybody, here we go with the first part of Chapter 13, Language Assessment and Instruction in the Classroom. Learning outcomes. I'll be describing methods for identifying language and communication difficulties and identifying classroom-based methods that can be used to enhance language skills in children across different ages and ability levels. So, the RTI model, the response to intervention model, really got big in the late 90s, early 2000s. And what was happening prior to this was that the parent or the teacher would refer the child for speech therapy, for special education. Child would be tested, and then if they would qualify, they'd then immediately be pulled out of class to get services outside of the classroom. And so they were like immediately missing time in the general ed classroom. So what the RTI model tries to do is to keep all the kids in the general ed classroom as much as possible. So a child gets referred, child gets tested, we're going to keep them in the classroom. So primary level of prevention, instruction, core curriculum is going to be tier 1. So keeping them in the classroom, the teacher is going to modify their teaching based on the needs of the child, based on the information given to them from the SLP, from the audiologist, from the special education teacher, from the reading teacher. All right, we're going to try that for a little while. If that's not working, we're going to move to tier 2, which is going to be a secondary level of prevention, intervention. So then these kids are going to be pulled out of class for at least a short period of time each week to receive intervention, again, outside the classroom, but then the teacher is also going to keep going with interventions in the classroom for these kids. And then, if things still aren't working or if things are really pretty severe, right, that's when we're going to be at tier 3, the tertiary level of prevention, where we're going to have intensive intervention. So maybe more time out of the classroom, but again, trying to keep these kids in the classroom as much as possible, no matter how severe the disorder is. So the RTI model uses universal screening of students to identify those who are falling behind their peers. It's a tiered system of intervention that starts with the use of evidence-based instruction in the general ed classroom and proceeds to more individualized, intensive intervention for those children who do not respond adequately to less intense instruction. There's an RTI Action Network website that you can check out that gives more information and resources that can be used to implement what teachers are doing in the classroom. So classroom teachers play an important role in identifying children at risk for language impairments and in planning and implementing instruction. Classrooms provide a rich environment for the use of language, right? So can children understand and follow directions? Can they ask questions? Can they participate in discussions? Can they interact with their peers? And can they use language skills for reading and writing? Remember, we've said before that, kids who have a, speech and language sort of specific impairment are usually going to be identified either in pre-K or right away in kindergarten, and might get help then. But there are lots of kids that are kind of on the borderline who, is it a language issue? Is it social? Is it cognitive? And they can kind of hang in there for a while until the language load gets too much, right? There's too much reading, too much writing. It's at a higher level. and it just gets too hard for them. And it's going to be the classroom teachers that are going to be the best people who are going to be able to say, okay, wow, this child's not doing what they need to be able to do to be successful. Whereas the parents, again, if it's a pretty, obvious speech and language issue, they're going to be, really on it early on. But if it's an educational issue, again, it's going to be the classroom teachers that are going to identify and refer a lot of these kids. Nelson suggests that teachers observe the child's ability to use language rule systems, right, form, content, and use in multiple modalities: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. Teachers can also gather more specific language information. So asking the students to retell stories, explain the steps in solving math problems, can be, pretty high level here, where we're going, we've got a beginning, middle, and an end, and step 1, step 2, step 3. A lot of kids with language issues are going to break down doing those things. Use of checklists can be helpful to provide a framework for the observation. Classroom-based assessments can be useful for both determining the child's current status and looking at performance over time, consistent with the RTI model of continuous assessment for identification of learning problems, right? So we're going to be assessing people in the classroom. So as an SLP, part of what the assessment will be, it's not only the standardized test, right? We're going to go into the classroom and we might ask the teacher, is there a time when there's going to be group work? Is there going to be a time when there are going to be presentations, during reading aloud? So we can get a good picture of what the teacher's seeing. Language elicitation tasks are going to be useful when opportunities for observation may be too limited, or the use of some language structures may be too infrequent. Language elicitation sets up activities to prompt a certain kind of response. So showing a child a cartoon and then asking questions about it to elicit past tense ed ending. So, right, what did the cat do, right? So we're going to ask a past tense question to try to get a past tense answer, right? Imitation can also be a useful way to quickly assess the child's knowledge of a particular language structure. So children will be able to repeat, it says only those language structures that they have already mastered, but they're going to have a hard time, children will have a hard time repeating a sentence that's a passive sentence when they're only used to saying active sentences. Or, the more complicated the sentence is that the teacher or speech language pathologist says to them, they're not going to be able to repeat it. And so that's going to be a good way of knowing, okay, this is where this child breaks down. So this should be used in combination with other measures of language like morphology, syntax, and semantics. All right, here are some examples of the way to try to get at morphology and the morphology skills of the child. So having children complete a sentence that describes a picture. So examiner prompts a response by saying, this is a wug. Now there are 2 of them. There are 2 blank. So the child then provides a response. And the idea here is that by using nonsense words, the task is able to assess the child's knowledge of morphological rules, right? So if you're saying, here is a cat, now there are 2 of them, there are 2, right? The child may have heard the word cats, and so they understand that, okay, anytime there are a bunch of cats, I'm going to say cats, but that they might not understand the rule. So that if you use a nonsense word that they've never heard before, right, that's going to get at the rule rather than I have memory of hearing the word cats, so I'm just going to say that, but I don't understand the rule. All right. We can also do informal assessment of morphological awareness in other ways. Children are asked to complete the ending when given a series of words, such as run, ran, walk, walked. Right? Tester says, I'm going to ask you to figure out some missing words. If I say push and then say pushed, then I say jump, so you say blank. If the child doesn't respond correctly with jumped, the experimenter provides explanatory feedback. So again, do you know the rule here? All right, syntax. So one's called the Emperor's New Clothes. The examiner makes an untrue statement. So, oh, Shirley, what beautiful yellow boots you have, which you would say if the child's wearing flip-flops, which should prompt the child to respond with a negative, oh, I'm not wearing boots, right? And that's something good to know with kids in general, is that kids will correct you, right? If you say the wrong thing, kids are going to correct you. So it's a good way to get at negatives. It's a good way to get at feelings, attitudes. So just making statements, and in this case, making statements that you know that are wrong, to get at the answer, right? There's also what they call the screw up. The examiner makes a statement that does not match the action. Here's your snack, as the person hands the child a pencil, right? The child should respond by saying, that's not a snack, that's a pencil, right? So again, we're getting at that, no, that's not a snack. I can't eat that, right? All right. We've also got vocabulary, right? So now we're moving into semantics. So the target word is drill. Select the words which make sentence 2 most like sentence 1. We need drill on our skills. If we want to get better at our skills, we should study them, put a hole in them, do them a lot. Okay, so and that's not really worded well, but you get the point here. So right, here's the initial sentence, and then answer this question. Ecological assessment examines the child's behavior in context of environmental demands and expectations rather than comparing children to population norms. Right, so this is often used to evaluate students with severe disabilities. Normed tests may not be useful with this population, and functional goals may be of great importance. So instead of looking at a standardized test, which just says, all right, this compares you, what percentage of the population are you in? This test is going to say, right, what can you actually do, right? Here's an expectation that kids your age should be able to do. Can you do it or not? Rather than, you can do it like, the bottom 5% can do it, which isn't necessarily that helpful. So we've actually got 10 steps in the ecological assessment process. Number 1, get to know the student, identify the resources and supports available at home and in school, identify the student's strengths, develop goals for and with the student. Number 2, we're going to list activities and routines in a typical school day. So what does the child have to do? What are the special routines they have to follow? Observations and or interviews can be conducted to figure out what those routines are. Number 3, prioritize activities, routines, and develop a broad goal statement, right? So where is that child not able to follow routines? Where are they having trouble in activities? And then we're going to start out with a broad goal as far as what they're going to be able to do or not do. Then we're going to observe and record the behavior of a non-disabled peer and or conduct interviews to determine the key behavioral expectations for each activity or routine. Non-disabled peers are observed in order to understand what skills the student with disabilities needs to perform the target task, right? So what is it the kids who are doing, who are succeeding, are doing? And then what is our child not able to do? How can we either get them to do what the kids who are succeeding are doing, or how can we come up with a different strategy here? 5, observe and record the behavior of the student from initiation to completion of each activity and routine. 6, compare the behavior of the student with expectations for each activity routine and note when the student does not meet expectations to determine skills to be learned. So again, right, what's the child not able to do that their peers are able to do? And what do they need to do, and how can we help them? So we're going to highlight, number 7, highlight language and communication skills, right? So obviously that's what we're looking at here. Number 8, try to ascertain why key language communication behaviors are not demonstrated. The student may not be recognizing what he or she is supposed to do or say, so there's a strategy issue. The student may be unable to perform the skill. The student may be unmotivated to perform the skill. The student has never learned how to perform the skill, or the physical environment makes it difficult for the student to perform the skill, right? So this is actually a really cool way, I think, to look at this, right? Does the student not even realize that what they're supposed to do, or are they just unable to perform it, or do they maybe know but just don't care, it's not important to them, or no one's ever taught them how to do this, or right, there's something wrong with the environment and we need to change the environment. And it can be, I said or, but it could be and or, right? It could be 3 of these, 2 of these, 4 of these. So this is a really good way to be thinking about our kids and what they can or cannot do and why. Number 9, state the language communication objectives for each activity, right? What are the goals? And then develop an individualized instructional plan that's based on our goals for each of our goals, right? Our objectives and goals. So this is a really nice way to think about the process of coming up with goals and then how to try to achieve those goals. All right, universal screening is an element of the RTI model. Teachers use a formal assessment instrument with the entire class to identify their current level of performance and periodically repeat the assessment to monitor student progress. And again, they're going to do this with everybody, but they're going to be doing, this is the universal aspect, but obviously they'll be doing it more often with kids that are struggling. 2 measures can be used to identify elements of language. So there are preschool individual growth and development indicators, and there's also phonological awareness and literacy screening for preschoolers. All right, language instruction in the classroom. There's an increasing evidence that early instruction focusing on improving communication skills significantly enhances language skills and academic success of children, especially in reading. Some educators still rely primarily on intervention provided by specialists as the major source of language and communication instruction for children. The term intervention implies mainly outside instruction, right? But again, the whole idea of RTI is that the intervention is going to take place in the classroom, and that's going to be provided a lot of times by the classroom teacher who's working collaboratively with SLP, special education teachers, reading teachers. Classroom discourse is usually dominated by the teacher, and children usually are passive recipients of communication, right? So is there a lot of lecture going on, and as kids get older, there's going to be more lecture, right? But for our kindergartners, first graders, second graders, right, things should be more hands-on, and children should have a chance to talk and interact. So increased opportunities for language use in the classroom will give children valuable practice. There are 4 recommendations that teachers can use to enhance the language learning environment. Number 1, the physical setting must promote talk. So Many classrooms are actually organized to discourage interaction. Individual workstations and widely spaced rows are designed to help students concentrate, but they also have the effect of reducing interaction. Providing large tables where groups can work, learning centers, and interactive classroom displays can give students opportunities to interact in the classroom. 2, the teacher must provide opportunities for children to interact and use language as they learn. Teachers can structure classroom conversation around academic tasks. Teachers are sometimes reluctant to let students engage in conversations because they may stray off topic. In this case, though, teachers can redirect them back to the topic. Communication is the goal here. So any conversation would not necessarily be an off-task behavior. Number 3, the teacher needs to provide opportunities for children to use language for a variety of purposes and for a variety of audiences. Teachers can encourage class decision making and problem solving and provide opportunities for discussion and sharing. Teachers can provide opportunities for students to talk to each other, to younger children, through cross-age tutoring, and to adults, right? Parents and visitors. So, you can do things like having, if you've got a first grade class, having the fourth graders or fifth graders come in and actually read to the first graders, then have a conversation about what they're talking about, is really a cool way to get some interaction going. Number 4, the teacher needs to respond to the students' talk in ways that encourage continued talk. Teachers often ask questions in ways that give students little opportunity to respond. When students do reply, the teacher may not respond in ways that encourage further interaction. Following the child's lead in the setting the conversational in setting the conversational topic, one strategy for increasing interaction is to pause several seconds for a response to a question. Right? So, and if you think about these things, right, lots of times part of the problem is that if you've got one teacher, you've got 20 kids, 25 kids, right? The teacher often is just trying to control the room, control the behavior. And so if you're trying to control things, you're going to lose, those chances for conversation, for interaction. So it can be a little bit scary for classroom teachers to have more group activities, to have more of this, especially with young children who really need that time to be interacting and talking with their peers. All right, we're going to stop here and then do part 2 in another lecture.